Welcome back to the Adam Schefter podcast. It's the week that every football fan has waited for throughout the offseason. It's draft week. We are now in Green Bay. Got here about 2 hours ago, walked in my lobby. The Green Bay Packers practice squad players said hello, saw Cornelius Johnson, the former Michigan wide receiver who I didn't even realize was on the Packers practice squad. He lives in the hotel that we're staying in this week year-round. We are here for this week, and this is our home as we get ready to bring you the draft on Thursday night. There is all sorts of intel and information and insights flying around leading in to this week's draft, and we thought it would be a great place to start with our friend, the co-host of the Pat McAfee Show and the weekly host of this spot, Schmit, for this week's six-pack.
Thank you very much, Schefty. Good to see you're in Green Bay already. I cannot wait to get down there Tuesday. I assure you I am excited if I seem a little, down. I just did 5 days and 4 nights in Vegas, which, at 35 is just, it's just too long. Too long to be out there, but it was incredible. But now I can completely switch my focus to the draft. Like you mentioned, something we've all been waiting for. With that in mind, Schefty, let's get right into it. Let's get into topic number one of this week's six-pack. What is the latest draft intel going into Thursday night's first round? And overall, what's the meaning of the week, you think?
Well, I think there's a few things to keep in mind. We have not seen a trade. We've seen each of the teams stay in their spot. You're starting to hear, as Peter Schrager said this week, the Giants fielding calls at 3, the Browns fielding calls at 2. We know the Titans are staying at number 1. They've made that clear. They are ready to turn in their pick, though they'll take 10 minutes on Thursday night to make that selection, and we'll see how that winds up rolling on. But you're seeing some of the activity start to pick up. We heard the Bears general manager, Ryan Poles, say at his press conference today, he expects activity Thursday night. We're all waiting on it. But you think about it like this, Ty. This really is the moment that all these players, the 250 so odd players who are going to be drafted, they've worked their entire football lives for this moment. Their future is going to be dictated in the next few days by where they're drafted. We have teams who spend their entire season building up to this moment. Front offices, scouting staffs, scouts whose sole job it is to give their teams the best information about which players they should pick. So their work is coming to a head this week. It's sort of like being an accountant in the middle weeks of April. This is what that is for NFL front offices and scouting departments across the league. You've got media members, not me, who've worked on these prospects all year long. Field Yates, Mel Kiper. There are so many people that do so much for this week. All the ESPN people that pour everything into this week. All the players that have put everything into this week. The front offices that have put everything into this week. And it's the moment when I always like to say teams have to put their cards on the table and say who they like. We can talk all we want about whether the Jaguars will take Ashton Genty over Mason Graham or Ted McMillan over Ashton Genty, or what Liam Cohn is going to do in his first draft as the Jaguars head coach. But the truth of the matter is, when Thursday night rolls around, no more bluffing, no more lying, no more fibbing. Put your cards on the table, make the pick, and tell us what you think of certain players and what you think of your organization. It's the moment of truth. It's upon us. It's here. We haven't seen any trades yet as we tape this early Tuesday afternoon. I would imagine we won't get any trades until we're on the clock Thursday night. And even then, who knows how many trades we'll get. But again, there's so much going around. And you know what, Ty? On Monday, I wrote a column that ran on ESPN Plus. 5,000 words. One of the great editors at ESPN, Dane Beavers, proposed to me 2 years ago to do this. And literally, like in recent weeks, I've just been gathering notes and all that intel put into that column. So there's more intel there for the stuff that people miss here that they can read out, some of the minutia about teams moving up and around, prospects that are rising, prospects that are falling. Again, it all comes back to all the work that so many people have put into this week, starting with the players themselves to make their dreams come true here.
That's a great point. I think, a lot of the stuff we do leading up to the draft, like it's fun because there are just so many possibilities, especially with a year like this where it seems like everything's kind of a little more cloudy. But I agree, like I'm tired of pontificating. I'm tired of the guesswork, all that kind of stuff. I want to know where everyone's going to go. And you mentioned all the work everyone puts into this. The I'm excited as a Packers fan to see what the fan turnout's going to be like. I know it's going to be cold, it's going to be windy, but every year that they go to a new location like this, the NFL seems to kind of one up themselves. So I think everyone is excited and ready that it's finally here and we finally get to do this and we don't have to go back and forth with all the BS trying to figure out, like you said, all the different minutia and where people are going to go. So I'm ready for Thursday night to get here. I'm sure you are too, Schefty.
It's always like, to me, the way I think about the draft, it's almost the way you felt about a final exam in college. You knew that you had some final exams that last week in May, and once you got done with those final exams, you might have a job over the summer. You might have some work to do for school to get ahead for the next year. But basically, it was the unofficial start of summer recess, and it's not altogether dissimilar in the football world. Like, this is the last mile of a long race that's been going on since middle of July last year. And after this, there still will be Aaron Rodgers out there. There still will be fifth-year extensions and options picked up and contracts done. I got it. But the season will be over. The Super Bowl will be over. The hirings and firings will largely be over. Most of the trades will be over. Free agency will be over. The draft will be over. And it's a little bit of a break, a little bit of a respite for everybody to kind of catch their breath until we kick it back off again in mid to late July again.
Absolutely. And catching your breath, I mean, that's the crazy part is we were talking at the Super Bowl and then boom, now the draft's here. We're talking today about, hey, you kind of are going to get a little respite from everything. And then before we know it, it'll be week one again. So that's life in the NFL calendar, I suppose. But I'm excited. I know you are too. With that being said, let's get into topic number 2 of this week's Six Pack. In your opinion, Schefty, what was like the 8 or so day stretch, or let's call it a week or so, or 7 to 10 days, however you want to frame it, that had the biggest impact on this draft week?
I want to take you back, Ty, to the last 2 weeks of the 2024 season in New York and New England. In week 17, the Giants were going into their matchup against the Colts with Drew Lock as their starting quarterback in the 10th pole position to hold the number 1 overall pick. And they're playing a Colts team, your Indianapolis team, that needs to win the game to keep their playoff hopes alive. The Colts are favored to win that game. And instead, Drew Lock leads the Giants to a 45-33 win at home against the Colts. Now, it may not be a win that many people remember today, but guess what? That win knocked the New York Giants out of the top spot in the draft and prevented them from being in a position to go ahead and take Miami quarterback Cam Ward, who is now expected to be the first overall pick on Thursday night, to the Tennessee Titans. The Giants won that game. It's their job. Coaches are fighting for their jobs. Players are fighting for their jobs. You wouldn't expect anything less. I remember them winning that day. Malik Neighbors went off in that game. Drew Lock played great. They celebrated. It felt great. They won. And guess what? They lost control of the number 1 pick. And they tried to trade back up to number 1, to the spot that they lost out on, by beating the Colts 45-33 in week 17, and could never get back up there, leaving them in this quarterback quandary that they entered this draft with. And then the very next week, In week 18, New England's playing Buffalo. New England's got the top slot thanks to the Giants' win against the Colts. And New England's playing a division rival, the Buffalo Bills. And I remember somebody in the New England organization saying to me, watch. The Buffalo Bills are going to find a way to lose this game because they have nothing at stake to allow us to win, to knock us out of the number one spot. And lo and behold, in week 18, with Joe Milton playing at quarterback for the Patriots, they put Joe Milton in over Drake May because they were trying to do their best to keep things on an even keel and be competitive and maybe not win the game. They still won the game, 23-16. And so the Giants went from owning and controlling the number one overall pick in week 17 to the Patriots owning and controlling the number one pick in week 18, to where both teams win at the time, whatever you say, meaningless games that have an enormous impact on the draft Thursday night and set up Tennessee with the number one overall pick and the chance to get Cam Ward. Those two wins shaped the future of three franchises: the Giants, the Patriots, and the Tennessee Titans. It's unbelievable that would happen right now, but that's how it works. And the Giants lost out and the Patriots lost out. They won the games, and they are in a worse position on Thursday night because of it.
Yeah, exactly. And now we're looking at, both those teams, the Giants especially potentially losing out on a franchise quarterback, the Patriots potentially losing out on one of these, generational talents, if you will, in the draft. And now we're hearing, a couple days before the draft, there's a chance, hey, they're fielding phone calls. There's a chance both these teams maybe move back or, don't end up. I mean, we'll see. That being from Indianapolis, living here, obviously I remember that situation very well. We have a Patriots fan in the office. We have a Giants fan in the office. So at that point in the season, those guys knew, like, what are we doing? This is going to have massive implications come April. But, I think you're right. I think probably very few people are thinking back to how meaningful that was in two games that were seemingly just throwaway. No one gives a damn about these. No playoff implications. It's crazy how that can shape, the future of the NFL. It's wild to think about.
Shape Thursday night, and it's going to shape those franchises for years to come. Can you imagine if the Giants had just lost out to teams playing for playoff spots, got the number one pick? They wouldn't have had to make trade attempts. They would have been getting Cam Ward. We wouldn't be debating what are the Giants going to do at 3, whether they're going to take Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe or Tyler Shuck. It would be over. They would have Cam Ward regarded as the number one prospect in this draft. But instead, they beat the Colts. They have that win.
That's the way it works. It's not fair, but that's the way it works. So that'll be something to, whether or not they stick and pick or trade back and try to accrue a couple assets. We'll keep an eye on that moving forward. Let's move on to topic number 3 and what has been the most widely talked about topic when it comes to this year's draft. We just had Peter Schrager on Pat's show earlier, Schefty, and he said at this point he's hearing Shedeur could potentially go anywhere from 2 to the Browns to, the Saints at 9, the Steelers at 20, maybe into the second round. Someone trades up and gets him at the tail end of the first round. I feel like we still have no idea where Shedeur is going to go. As of right now, where do you see Shedeur going? And how many QBs do you think are ultimately going to go in round 1? I think the over-under is set at 2.5.
Yeah, me personally, I would take the under. I think the under is going to come in. I don't mean to disagree with my colleague Peter Schrager. He may be proven right here in this draft. We'll see come Thursday and Friday night. But I think we're going to get the under in the first round. And again, if Shedeur goes at 3, and my guess today would be he doesn't, but I'm not ready to rule it out. But if Shedeur Sanders goes 3 to the New York Giants, that speeds up the clock on the quarterbacks going in the first round. And so if Shedeur is sitting there past 3 and past 9, which I would expect him to not be picked at 9. And now we're getting to a place where no team's trading up into the teens. And all of a sudden, the Pittsburgh Steelers at 21 are on the clock, and Shedeur and the second quarterback still hasn't been picked. I don't see 3. I see maybe 2, maybe even 1, depending on how it goes. Now, I know teams place value on quarterbacks, and that's always the case, but we've seen other drafts where that has not been the case. And I could think of this past week, there was a team that told me that they don't have any first-round grades on any of the quarterbacks in this draft, including Cam Ward. Another GM telling me that Cam Ward would have been the 7th quarterback picked in last year's quarterback draft class. So I just don't know that this collection of quarterbacks, I just don't think is viewed as this great group of quarterbacks. And because of that, I think we're going to see less rather than more in the first round. Now, again, I reserve the right to change my mind if Shedeur goes early after Cam Ward and then the quarterbacks start moving. But I don't see it going that way right now. I think we're going to get fewer quarterbacks in the first round than we normally do. I think Shedeur, we're looking at 3. I think we're looking at 21. I think we're looking at a trade back scenario for a team like the Giants, the Browns. Remember, the Steelers don't have a second round draft pick.
Right.
The Steelers are willing to move back in the first round. So if the Steelers are willing to move back from 21, that tells you that they may like Shedeur, but they're certainly not committed to Shedeur if they're willing to move back, which they are. So a lot of things up in the air. Shedeur Sanders is easily, in my mind, the biggest question going into this draft. The other big question is how many quarterbacks will there be selected in round 1, and where will all these quarterbacks, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Tyler Shuck, Shedeur Sanders, where are they going to go? That is a tremendous question. And by the way, let's also remember Quinn Ewers and Will Howard and some of the Kyle McCord and some of the other quarterbacks in this draft class as well. But my guess would be the under comes in. That's my read, my guess. And Shedeur could be anywhere from 3 to 21 to a team trading back up and maybe even make it into the second round. But in the second round, Ty, the Cleveland Browns hold the first pick 33 on Friday night. The Giants hold, I believe, the second pick 34 Friday night. And the New Orleans Saints have pick 40. I think there's a scenario where we may see more quarterbacks picked in the first 8-9 picks on Friday night than we do all of Thursday night.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by that. I mean, at this point, I guess I wouldn't be surprised either if Shedeur does go, and then, I know some people are saying, hey, there's a possibility that, 4 quarterbacks go just because of the need for the position and all that kind of stuff. But I agree. I am kind of leaning more towards your camp. I think there's, I think there's a chance, Cam Ward's the only one who gets taken. I think Shedeur ends up going in the first round, but who knows? I mean, that's going to be the biggest source of drama in the first round. So we'll obviously follow that closely, just like we have been from the get-go here. Let's move on to topic number 4, Schefty. Shedeur obviously is the biggest storyline of this draft. But what about, give me a lesser talked about storyline that you think is going to loom large come Thursday night, or for the whole week, I guess.
Ty, we're coming off a season in which Saquon Barkley left the New York Giants to go to the Philadelphia Eagles, amassed over 2,000 rushing yards, helped the Philadelphia Eagles win the Super Bowl. We're coming off a season where Derrick Henry went from Tennessee to Baltimore and had an enormous impact on the Ravens' rushing attack and the success of that franchise. We're coming off a season in which Josh Jacobs went to the Green Bay Packers and made a huge impact on the Packers offense. We're coming off a season in which all these running backs had big years, and we saw the value of the running back reestablished. I brought up Josh Jacobs in Green Bay. Well, here we are in Green Bay, the city, the town that witnessed the effect that the presence of a running back could have. And here we are where the draft is now going to be held, where we're going to have a huge influx of running back talent into the National Football League. Ashton Genty is expected to be the first running back selected on Thursday night. I expect him to be a top 10 pick, going anywhere from, let's just say, number 5, Jacksonville, as it's currently constituted, to the Bears at number 10. And we'll see ultimately where Ashton Genty goes. Then we've got a group of running backs. There are front offices that think that there are 6 running backs that could be first-round talents. Now, there won't be 6 running backs who go in the first round. There will be, in the end, if I had to guess, 2 running backs that get drafted in the first round. Maybe 3, maybe 1. But there are 6 blue-chip running backs and any number of running backs after that. Travion Henderson could go in the first round. Omarion Hampton could go in the first round. We've got Caleb Johnson, who is going to be a high pick. We've got other running backs. This is considered to be a really deep running back class, which is fitting because we're in Green Bay, which saw what a running game could do last year. We're coming off the year where running backs had a dramatic effect, and running backs, as much as any other position, are going to have a dramatic impact on this draft.
Absolutely. And I think I want to say it was last week on the podcast, Schefty, you said that a lot of people you were talking to thought that there were 10 running backs in the top 100 players of this draft.
Right.
I mean,
right.
So like if that's any indication, again, I think now when you see what some of these running backs are doing in the, the pass game as well, being able to catch the ball out of the backfield, obviously, everything with Saquon kind of put a premium back on the position, but who knows when the next time it is we'll see, 10% of the top 100 players in the draft be running backs. I just don't know if we're going to get very many classes that are like that. And it does seem like a lot of these guys who could go in the top 60 to 70 picks, like a lot of them could be day one starters too. There's a chance you look at a lot of these teams who, I don't want to say they're a running back away, but you look at a team like the Broncos, who it's like, hey, if you have a solid 3-down back that you can add to their offense, that changes things for them, like exponentially. So I think you're right on there. I think we're going to get a big run of guys who come in and contribute right away as well.
Big running back class, and it'll have a big impact on Thursday and Friday nights. We may see a run on running backs Friday night the way we do on quarterbacks on Friday night.
Okay, so that'll be something to keep an eye on. I enjoy that because, again, I feel like that's kind of a little caveat that we haven't gotten. It's been a while since we've had that type of draft with that much talent at the running back position. Let's move on to topic number 5, Schefty. In your opinion, what's an alternative reason why there have been so few trades so far? And do you think that we're going to get more trades come Thursday night, Friday, et cetera, et cetera?
All along, Ty, I thought the lack of trades in the first round, and as we tape this Tuesday afternoon, every team holds its initial first-round draft pick. I thought the lack of trades was directly related to the quarterbacks in this draft class. And I still think that in part is true. But in talking to front offices the last few days, I think the other thing that is driving the lack of trades so far in this draft, especially lately, is the way that front offices view the quality of talent in this draft in rounds 2 and 3. They believe that rounds 2, 3 into round 4 is the real sweet spot in this draft. And front offices have said that the player that you get at 10 in this draft, maybe even 5, is the same as the player you get at number 32. But there are a group of players that these front offices are eyeing from pick, say, 32 through 100 that they believe are the types of players that teams really can't wait to get a hold of. So if that is the case, that rounds 2, 3, and to a lesser extent 4 are the sweet spots of this draft. If you're a team like the Jaguars and you want to go from 5 to 3 and it's going to cost you your 2 and 3. I'm making this up. You don't want to give up those picks. You don't want to give up those picks in a draft like this where teams don't view it being a draft with a ton of blue chip Hall of Fame future players. There's no left tackle that teams say is as good as Joe Alt was last year. There's no wide receiver that teams are looking at right now and saying, this guy is the next Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors right now. You're missing the top flight quarterbacks by and large, in the opinion of many, not Tennessee, but in the opinion of many others. And so teams don't see a great number of players to trade up for, and they don't want to give up their picks on Friday night in rounds 2 and 3, because those right now seem to be the picks that are most valued. And so while the quarterback class isn't strong, and that has contributed to why there's been a lack of trade activity, I really believe it has something to do with where the strength of this draft is considered in front offices and teams being unwilling to part with those picks that they're really valuing going into this draft.
Now, we wouldn't really be privy to this stuff, I don't think, today or like this week, but do you think that we're going to get some like established veterans traded on draft night as well, or do you think it's mostly going to be teams moving around jockeying for picks?
Well, when I did that draft column on Monday, I listed a group of veterans and a group of players who are in their rookie contracts, any one of which could be dealt. Now, we'll get our usual fair share of trades, probably a couple on Sunday involving some players. I don't know if it's going to be any more or less than usual, but inevitably you see teams trying to move on from some players. We've mentioned in this spot before the fact that the Eagles have 20 picks over the next 2 drafts and 20 players can't make their roster the next 2 years. So if there's a player out there that's available, that's reasonable, it would not surprise me if the Eagles made a trade for a veteran. So you're going to see some of that. I just don't know exactly who, what, when, and why, but you'll see some of those trades.
Okay, because I feel like, I know I do. I know we tend to do it in here too. You kind of psych yourself up every year thinking like a guy like Trey Hendrickson, or, we start hearing this stuff about A.J. Brown getting moved, and yeah, exactly. You convince yourself that it's going to happen, knowing full well that it's not going to happen, but...
Yeah. By the way, it feels like everybody's waiting for something like that. Like, A.J. Brown's he's not getting traded. Okay. Oh, what about, Mark Andrews? Well, the Ravens have been non-committal there. What about Dallas Goedert? Well, that's been going on. So, there are veterans who are up. What about Tyreek Hill?
Yeah.
Again, Tuesday afternoon, I had somebody text me today, hey, do you hear that Tyreek Hill's being traded to the Cowboys? Let me check. So I'm checking with people. No, Tyreek Hill's not being traded to the Cowboys. A.J. Brown's not being traded to the Patriots. None of these big name wide receivers to date are being shopped or traded. Now, could this change time? Sure. And everybody's on high alert in the event that it does. But to date, nothing there.
Okay. So there you go. If you're trying to, get a couple hacks in these last few hours before the draft starts and you want to, conjure up some fake trade, now might be your last chance to do it before we officially know that, that it's all bullshit. None of that stuff's going to happen. Let's move on to the 6th and final topic of this week's Six-Pack Schefty. I want to go through every team in the NFL. We'll start alphabetically and just rapid fire. When I say the city or the team, just give me the first thing that comes to mind. All right, so let's start with the Arizona Cardinals.
They've added 3 key defensive linemen this offseason. Josh Sweat, Dalvin Tomlinson, Calais Campbell. So they've addressed the defensive line. It might be time to address the offensive line for the Arizona Cardinals in this draft, but they also still need help at cornerback.
Atlanta Falcons.
Well, they have essentially been in a situation where they have not gotten any type of noticeable pass rush for a long period of time right now. Haven't had a player in double-digit sacks in a while. They've had 7 consecutive losing seasons. They haven't made the playoffs since 2017. And obviously, we're all waiting on Kirk Cousins and what happens there. My guess ultimately would be that they find a new home for him I don't know whether that's Minnesota. I don't know if it's Pittsburgh, if the Aaron Rodgers opportunity fizzles, but those would be two places that would make some sense to me.
Baltimore Ravens.
We got Mark Andrews in the final year of his contract. No guaranteed money left. They have big fifth-year decisions looming on safety Kyle Hamilton and Tyler Linderbaum. Linderbaum, they might decline that option because the center market is at $18 million a year, and it'll be more logical to do an extension. And let's also keep on, they've never drafted a guard in the first round in the John Harbaugh era. I don't know if they'll do it now, but they've never done that before.
Buffalo Bills.
They have that unsettled situation with running back James Cook, who wants a new contract, didn't report to the offseason program, and is now entering the final year of his deal.
Carolina Panthers.
They have allowed an NFL worst 404 yards per game last season. Their defense was on the field, an average of 68 plays per game, the worst in the league, and they need to help that defense.
Chicago Bears.
They allowed 68 sacks last year, worst in the league. They allowed the most sacks in the league the last 3 years. It's why they fortified their offensive line in free agency and why they will look to continue to add to the offense in this draft.
Cincinnati Bengals.
They're the only team in the league to finish in the bottom 5 in rushing yards per game in each of the past 3 years, and yet they really need defensive help in this draft.
Cleveland Browns.
They averaged a league-low 15.2 points per game last season, ending the season by scoring 14 or fewer points in each of their last 5 games. This has been an inept offense, and they need to find a way to be more explosive. Travis Hunter certainly would help.
Dallas Cowboys.
Everybody's waiting for the moves the Cowboys would make. I know they've been talking about a running back. They need running back help, but I think they're going to look to shore up wide receiver and quarterback as well.
Denver Broncos.
Sean Payton has been looking for a joker, whether it's at running back, wide receiver, or tight end for some time now. And it would be an upset if he didn't come out of this draft with some type of joker to enhance last year's first-round draft pick, Bo Nix.
Detroit Lions.
The Lions had the oldest starting offensive line in the league last year, an average of almost 30 years per player. They're going to have to find some youth on that offensive line in this draft.
Host City, Green Bay Packers.
Do you remember the last time the Green Bay Packers drafted a wide receiver in the first round of the draft? 23 years ago.
Javon
Walker from Florida State. The last time, maybe that streak comes to an end.
Fingers crossed. Houston Texans.
They are all about upgrading the offensive line. They shipped out Laramie Tunsil. They've even talked about moving up in this draft. I would expect the Texans to really invest in their offensive line this weekend.
Indianapolis Colts.
2 things to keep in mind with the Colts. It feels like they've been trying to get a tight end for the last 2 years, and it wouldn't be a surprise if one of these tight ends fell to them in round 1. Plus, they selected Quentin Nelson 6th overall in 2018. In the 6 years since then, they haven't picked an offensive lineman in the first 2 rounds since then.
Jacksonville Jaguars.
I think they're looking for offensive weapons. The new head coach, Liam Cohn, has an offensive background, and even when they need help on defense, offensive coaches usually want help on the offensive side of the football. Won't be a surprise to see an offensive player go with their first pick.
Kansas City Chiefs.
They're still trying to shore up the tackle position despite all that they've invested in it in recent years. A player like Josh Simmons from Ohio State would make a lot of sense to me going to Kansas City at the back end of round 1.
Las Vegas Raiders.
New regime. Even though they have holes, they want to win now. They traded for Geno Smith. Pete Carroll loves to run the football, but they still can use help along the offensive line and defensive line. There's a lot of ways that new GM John Spytek could go with that 6th overall pick.
Los Angeles Chargers.
You know, there's a lot of great Michigan players in this draft time. And it wouldn't be a surprise if somehow Jim Harbaugh, the former Michigan coach, found a way to draft either defensive tackle Kenneth Grant or cornerback Will Johnson or tight end Colston Loveland or defensive end Josiah Stewart or running back Khalil Mullins or running back Donovan Edwards. Let's watch for which Michigan players wind up in L.A.
Like that is a very good chance that's going to happen. Let's stay in L.A. Los Angeles Rams.
I know a lot of people have talked about the Rams needing a quarterback for Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford might play another year or two, and I still would be surprised if they went quarterback in round one. I think they're more likely to go cornerback or a linebacker or another position of need.
Miami Dolphins.
Need help everywhere, but especially on the offensive line. They're sitting there with the 13th overall selection. They need to protect Tua moving forward.
Minnesota Vikings.
They have the fewest picks of any team in the draft this year, 4. So if they could find a spot in which they can move back in the draft and get more picks, I think the Vikings would love to be able to do that.
New England Patriots.
They're sitting there at number 4. We talked about how they lost out on the number 1 selection, but Will Campbell certainly seems like a Mike Vrabel type of pick to help be the first pick of the Mike Vrabel regime.
New Orleans Saints.
Everybody's waiting for a quarterback, but they might wait a little while on a quarterback. They've got a lot of needs with a new head coach in Kellen Moore, and they've got holes along the offensive and defensive lines to address here.
New York Giants.
None of the Giants quarterbacks currently on their roster, Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, Tommy DeVito, are under contract beyond this season. So they're going to try to find a quarterback that will be on contract beyond this season.
Let's stay in New York with the Jets.
First pick of the Aaron Glenn regime. I think he's going to want a player that helps define his regime. I would think it would be on the defensive side of the football. It'd be interesting if Mason Graham slipped to number 7 and the New York Jets.
Defending Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia Eagles.
20 picks in the next 2 drafts. The ammunition to do what they want. Could move around, could trade for a veteran. They're always aggressive, and I would imagine they will be here as well.
Pittsburgh Steelers.
Again, Omar Khan, the GM, said this week they are going to take 4 quarterbacks to training camp. There are 2 quarterbacks currently on the roster, Mason Rudolph and Skylar Thompson. Who are those last 2? Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, Shedeur Sanders, Jalen Milroe, Tyler Shuck. I would imagine they'll come out of this draft with one of those rookie quarterbacks, and then they'll find a way to add another veteran, whether it's Rodgers or Cousins.
San Francisco 49ers.
They have more holes on both sides of the line than people realize. Right now, the defensive line is very light, and we think of this as one of the best teams in the league, but right now, they need a lot of reinforcements before we can talk about them like that.
Seattle Seahawks.
They haven't used a first or second round pick on a quarterback since they took Rick Meyer in 1993. So we're talking about here over 30 years without a top pick on a quarterback. Let's see if general manager John Schneider changes that this year.
Tampa Bay Bucks.
Nobody has drafted more players and have succeeded than I think Bucs GM Jason Light. Under Light, the Buccaneers lead the NFL in total snaps, over 132,000 in games started, almost 1,900 by players that they drafted themselves in rounds 1 through 5.
Wow. Tennessee Titans.
Number 1 pick. Pick is in. Decisions made. They're not trading the pick. We're not allowed to spoil it, right?
No. Yep. Can't spoil it.
So we won't say anything about Cam Ward going number 1.
All right. And last but not least, Washington Commanders.
They've made a lot of changes already. Let's not forget that they traded for Deebo Samuel and Laramie Tunsil. So when we come out of this looking at their draft class, you have to factor Tunsil and Deebo Samuel, 2 perennial Pro Bowl players, into their allotment of players that they got out of this draft class.
Well done. That's everybody.
Hey, Ty, it's going to be a great week. And I will say this. I know these host cities take so much pride in putting on an event like this, whether we've been in New York or Chicago or Dallas or Philadelphia or Kansas City. or any place that we've been. I'm drawing a blank.
Nashville.
Nashville has become the traveling road show, but it's become very personal to these cities and the people who live in them to make it a huge success. The draft next year is going to be in Pittsburgh. I know Pittsburgh's going to be a great host city. I know Green Bay is going to be a great host city. We are here in Green Bay, and we are ready to bring you the action on Thursday night, Friday night, all day Saturday. Should be a great week in what is the final exams in our NFL calendar year before we hit a little bit of a lull and a little bit of a summer break. We know everybody's going to enjoy it. We hope everybody enjoys it. I want to thank you, Ty Schmit, for leading us in another six-pack, my great producer, Dan Stanzik, for helping put this together, and you, the listener, for tuning into another Adam Schefter podcast. Please join us again in this space. Next week, we'll have Mel Kiper Jr. and Phil Yates along to provide their review of the 2025 NFL Draft, and Ty will be back for another weekly six-pack. Until then, enjoy the 2025 NFL Draft from Green Bay, Wisconsin.